Welcome to Christian Overcomers, and thank you for joining us for this Bible study, Genesis chapter 16, Hagar, Abraham and Sarah's big mistake. You know, whenever you try to get God's blessings your own way, or whenever you try to take a shortcut to get those blessings, without being patient and waiting for God's timing, you could end up bringing a lot of trouble into your life. And that's what we see happen here with Abraham and Sarah with the introduction of Hagar. So let's get right into it. Genesis chapter 16, verse 1, and now Sarai, Abraham's wife, bare him no children. And she had an handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abraham, Behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abraham hearkened to the voice of Sarai. Now think about this. God had already gave the promise that Abraham's seed would be it would be numerous. It would be great. But now Sarai is doubting here. She's waiting for I think it's maybe been like 10 years or something at this point. And since that promise was given by God, and she's waiting and she's waiting and she's thinking, well, maybe we ought to help God do this. Maybe we ought to come up with our own little way to get God's promises. And that, sometimes we're tested. Sometimes when God gives us a promise, there's a period of time that we have to wait. And in this instance, Sarai figured, well, it's been 10 years. I don't want to wait any longer. All right? So let's see what happens. Well, obviously we saw that Abraham agreed. Now, you think about that. It's kind of similar to what Adam did in the Garden of Eden. He listened to his wife to disobey God. It's a lesson for men today. Men, you're supposed to be the spiritual leader of your family. You're supposed to be the head of your household. Abraham should have said, no, Sarai, I understand your concern. I know that you're impatient and you want to have a son. But we've got to leave it in God's hands. But he didn't do that. He said, well, okay, yeah, let's do that. So they're getting together, Abraham and his wife, and they're trying to figure out a shortcut to God's blessings. All right? And Sarai said unto Abraham, Behold, now... Oh, okay, we read that verse. Verse 3. And Sarai, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian. After Abraham had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abraham to be his wife. Okay? Verse 4. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. Okay, so now we got some strife happening here. Some jealousy between Hagar and Sarai here. Not a good thing. You see how this situation develops? Sometimes we might, let's just say if it's somebody's ministry, they want to take a step that's not really the step that God has given them. Well, they could end up causing some trouble, bringing trouble upon themselves. Okay? What we see here in this chapter is Abraham and Sarai bring trouble unto themselves because of lack of patience. We've got to have patience. In the New Testament, it talks about the patience and the faith of the saints. Okay? Impatience can cause us to do dumb things. We've got to be patient and rely upon the Lord in His timing. All right, verse 5, And Sarai said unto Abraham, My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes, and the Lord judged between me and thee. So Sarai's admitting her mistake here. She's saying, hey, I really messed up here by giving you Hagar to be your wife. Now she despises me, and there's this conflict between these two women. No doubt this is probably, when you're talking about anytime in the Bible where a man had more than one wife, it seems as though there was some problems with that. All right, some problems. Verse 6, and Abraham said unto Sarai, behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do unto her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dwelt hardly with her, she fled from her face. So Abraham says here, he says, hey, okay, I understand. He's honoring the wishes of his main wife, so to speak, if that's what you want to call her. And he says, hey, she's in your hand. You deal with her as you see fit. She's your servant. She's your property, in other words. And so Sarai, or Hagar, did not like this treatment. So she runs away. She's a runaway slave. All right, we're going to see what happens here. And the angel of the Lord found Hagar, by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. Okay, so this angel comes to her. I mean, think about this. She's running away and she's in this wilderness area, and an angel comes to her to speak to her. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, whence comest thou? And whither goest thou? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress, Sarai. All right? So the angel's questioning her. He knows what's going on. He knows, he's just making her think. It's God does that. Parents do that. Hey, what are you doing? Where are you going? Even though you know what they're doing. It's a way of addressing the situation here. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hands. Now, a lot of people would have trouble with this today, especially. She was bought with money. She was a slave, and she was Abraham's and Sarah's property at this time. And the angel tells her to go back, to submit. All right, this has got to be a hard thing. After being treated poorly, number one, being a slave in the first place, this has got to be a very hard thing to do, to actually go back and submit. But but submission is a part of the Bible. God will, if she goes back and submits, God would see to it that the plan for her would be carried out according to His will. All right? We've got to submit to God's will. That's just something that a lot of people have difficulty with. In marriage, this is a slave submitting to the master at this time. But in today's time, you have, now I don't like to equate the two, but you have a husband and a wife. And in the New Testament, the wife is supposed to submit unto the husband. And he's supposed to lead his wife as Christ does the church. It's a natural order of things. So no doubt this has got to be pretty hard. So he tells her, this angel says, go back and submit. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. So if she goes back, if Hagar goes back and submits, there's a blessing promised to her. Okay? God works in mysterious ways. God works in mysterious ways. 11, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, and thou shalt bear a son, and thou shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. Now, Ishmael is thought to be the Arab nations today, those nations that are predominantly Islamic at this time. Verse 12, and he shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Okay, so interesting. He says this Ishmael, he's going to have a wild nature. And when you look at the Middle East today, they can be wild. They can be wild. Those, with their infighting and all this stuff going on. I mean, they are known as wild people over there. Okay, every hand against one another. There's always turmoil in there. Iraq versus Iran. This nation against that nation, and you name it. Verse 13. And she called the name of the Lord and said unto her, Thou God seest me, for she said, Have I also here looked after him that seeth me? Wherefore the well was called Ber Laharui. I probably botched that one pretty good, but we'll go with that. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. Ishmael, okay? That's his name. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram. So 80, that's 4 times 20, that's 86 years old when he had this son. So perhaps Abraham is thinking, okay, this is how I'm going to get all my offspring, all my descendants that God has promised me is going to come through this Ishmael. But we'll see about that. I guess we'll see about that in our next study. So hey, when you look at it, Abraham and Sarai shortchanged, or they tried to take a shortcut to receive God's blessings, and in the end, it caused a great deal of turmoil and strife. Not only for their intermediate family, but later on, even generations later. But we know that Ishmael is not going to be the line that God's going to provide Abraham with all of his many descendants. The covenant and the promises will not go through Ishmael. It'll go through Isaac and then on to Jesus Christ himself. All right, hey, I hope you enjoyed that study. We'll get into it next time. God bless you. Stay in his word every single day so that you can be a Christian overcomer.
Christian Overcomers is brought to you by the tithes and offerings of our listeners. If you would like to support our ministry, please go to ChristianOvercomers.com. God bless you, and thank you for your support.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible sword. His truth is marching on.